For the second consecutive week, the Ducks kind of started off a little bit slow. On this particular Saturday, they surged in the second half to a 41-7 victory over their rival, Oregon State. We're wrapping up all things Civil War here on that postgame show out west.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
And welcome to that post-game show out west for that team out west. I'm Ted LeBrew. You know, there were some people, now who would do this? Okay, maybe it was me. There were some people out there that were predicting a 50-point victory. You guys knew my prediction was 56-6 on Thursday's show. And people were saying 50 points, 60 points. Just how high can these Ducks fly against a struggling, bad Beavers team that were in the triple digits when it came to Bill Conley's SP+, lower in those particular ratings than one Montana State. I think a lot of people were expecting that, you know, like that 59 performance that we saw in week one against the Bobcats, the 69-point performance that we saw against Oklahoma State in week two. But you got to give credit where credit is due. Okay, the Beavs coming down about an hour from Corvallis here to Eugene. And you got to give them credit for kind of fighting, specifically early in this game, kind of pushing back on that narrative that they were going to be pushed around and maybe roll over and die a little bit. So you got to give them at least a little bit of credit for fighting early on within this football game as well. But 41-7, 4-0, those are the numbers that really matters when all is said and done. And I've seen a lot of people that I listen to, a lot of people that I watch, you know, hosts of some podcasts, writers, all these kinds of things. Now, and I've seen them tweet this following the game, and here we go. 4-0. Preseason is over. You better have your best product ready to go 7 days from now when you go to Happy Valley and face the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, we're going to cross that bridge. Believe me, we got a Monday show. You bet your ass we got a Thursday show as well, where we're going to have a pretty darn big preview for that matchup, whiteout against that Big Ten foe, one of the Big Ten favorites in Penn State. We're going to cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, we're going to cross that Willamette River Bridge out to Autzen Stadium and what just happened in Autzen Stadium on Saturday. But before I get into my takeaways, the gold was shining today, wasn't it, man? The gold was shining on the helmets, on the uniforms. Boy, did those shoe duck unis look really, really good out there in the sun, which looked like to be a beautiful day out there in Eugene, Oregon. Of course, honoring and commemorating the legacy of one Phil Knight. You saw him up there in his traditional all black up in the box. They showed it on the Big Ten Network. All right, without further ado, let me get into my takeaways from this matchup. A 34-point victory over the Beavers of Oregon State. I like to use this analogy. You guys know I like to use this analogy, but took a couple of cranks on the lawnmower to kind of get humming, didn't it? A slower start, but a strong finish for the Oregon Ducks. And if you watch the first two drives of the game, the first offensive drive for Oregon and the first defensive drive for Oregon, you maybe wouldn't, it doesn't tell the same story than I think what the story is in the last three quarters of this game. Okay, Oregon came out, they get the ball first. Oregon State won the coin toss, they deferred. Ducks get the ball first, and they do what I think a lot of us expected them to do against this Oregon State defense. 7 plays, 75 yards, they're efficient. There's a strong connection. There looks like to be a strong chemistry, getting big chunk plays going down the field. And when we talk about those big chunk plays, we talk about Jade Lamar, first play of the game, hits a run for 22 yards. That drive ended with a 22-yard touchdown connection from Dante Moore to DeCorian Moore. I think DeCorian Moore looks pretty good. We know we had a little bit of an injury scare earlier in the week, but the only thing that's scaring anybody is, you know, what maybe opponents have to deal with when it comes to number one in the next few weeks. I think Duck fans They are not scared as it pertains to Dakorien Moore. They love the performance, I think, from Mr. Moore, the receiving end of the Mr. Moore connection. And then you look at Oregon's first defensive series. They come out, they play strong. They allowed a 2-yard run, a couple of incomplete passes, a 3-play, 2-yard, 3-and-out for the Oregon State offense. This is looking exactly as it should. But the next Oregon offensive drive kind of sputters out a little bit. And then Oregon State's offensive drive, they kind of took a little bit, they took a page out of what Northwestern did last week. Okay, let's keep Oregon's offense on the field. Let's attempt to run the football. Let's try to chew some clock. And they chew more than 7 minutes off of that clock. A 13-play, 64-yard drive. It ends with an Anthony Hankerson touchdown. Now, I bring this up because of everything that everybody talked about last week with the run defense and what Northwestern was able to do in the run game. Okay, I characterized it as inconsistent more than anything. And, of course, we know at the end of last year how that is a concern coming into this season. And they said that it was an emphasis coming into this season. Yeah, but there's 40 rushing yards for Oregon State out of those 64. So they ran the ball well on that drive. And you have a lot of, maybe the naysayers coming back into this thing. It's like, man, if we can't defend against Oregon State, a team with a poor offensive line, they're rotating a lot of guys that are inexperienced, who are we going to be able to shut down? There was a lot of that type of conversation. But with this slow start, both on offense and on defense, this is an Oregon team. Dan Lanning and the coaching staff, they were able to adjust as this game progressed. Because I mentioned 40 yards rushing for Oregon State on the one scoring drive. They didn't score the rest of the game. Hey, that's a thumbs up. We talk about finishing strong. Dan Lanning talked about finishing strong during the week. Got a couple of garbage time touchdowns last week against Northwestern. They put up a goose egg in the entire second half, really the entire last 3 quarters in this game. So I thought Oregon finished strong where maybe they weren't able to do that last week. Oregon State rushed for 27 yards the rest of the game after that 40 yards on that one drive, 2.6 yards per carry for Oregon State. So although people might still do this when we talk about on Sunday, on Monday, people are going to be like, look what happened on that one drive. But overall, 60 minutes, I think this game tells the story that they got a little bit better. They probably started at like a 5 or a 6, and then they ramped it up to about an 8 or a 9. But here's the fact of the matter. You need to be better against the run earlier in ball games. Everything now through these first 4 games, all anybody's going to be talking about this week is the data that we have and how does it translate to the big matchup in Happy Valley next week. If you start at a 5 or a 6 against Penn State, okay, it's not going to go well. They could get up 14-0, so you're down 14-0 on the road in State College, Pennsylvania, 100,000 people in a whiteout, and now you're really climbing from behind, and that's not a position you want to be in against that sort of team. So does this Oregon defensive line maybe get out to a more energetic start? You got 100,000 people. You're more amped for this big game? Maybe. We'll see. Has this entire roster kind of been looking forward to this game to really unleash? Maybe. We'll see. We just don't know the answer to that question yet. So you got to start at an 8 or a 9, I think, going forward. And they eventually got to that point against the Beavs in this game. So I think overall, offense and defense, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, they dominated those final 3 quarters of the game. There's absolutely no doubt about that when you watch the game, when you look at the box score, when you look at the numbers, when you look at the drive charts and the drive summaries. I think a big part for the surge through the second quarter, through the third quarter, through the fourth quarter, force was quarterback Dante Moore. Dante had his most productive performance to date. Have there been other performances that have maybe been a little bit more efficient, maybe more wow throws in a game? He had some wow throws in this game. He has wow throws every game. He impresses us every single game, but he put up over 300 yards in this game. He had 4 touchdown passes within this game, and he continues to be that guy. He continues to be that high tide that raises all of the boats around him. But I will say this about the first quarter, early on in this game, there was just things overall as a team. And things like just seemed a little bit more, I don't want to say difficult, but they just seemed a little bit harder. I guess I can't find the right word for it right now than they usually are. There was a pass, I believe it was to Gary Bryant Jr. Maybe he slipped or tripped a little bit out of his break and they couldn't convert a third down. There were some throws by Dante that there was like one or two throws that he maybe put into harm's way a little bit. Overall, hey, Dante had a fantastic performance, but early in this game, it took him a little bit maybe to kind of get into the swing of things. But once he got into the swing of things, great performance. I have no concern over that start for Dante Moore and this entire team because he certainly looked really good as this game went on. So I will certainly say that. I thought when you talk about that start and adjusting, I thought Oregon State did a good job of keeping things in front of them. Look, I know you had that fourth quarter 49-yard touchdown strike to Gary Bryant Jr. in the middle of the field. You had before that it was 31 yards to Malik Benson. So Oregon State wasn't going to allow what the other orange and black OSU allowed earlier this season, where you have those big explosive plays over the top. They wanted to keep everything in front of them. I thought overall, considering what Oregon State was against what Oregon was, I thought the Beavers did a pretty decent job in coverage, considering the big talent disparity. I know Dante Moore threw over 300 yards, and it's a little bit weird saying that, but overall, I think that's kind of what I saw certainly out there. I'll say this about the offensive line before I move into my last point here in my takeaways. Wasn't thrilled about the O-line. I thought the O-line played a pretty good performance last week. Alex Harkey allowed the first sack of the season. This is an Oregon team that had 5 penalties compared to just 2 penalties for Oregon State. I thought we might see a little bit more pre-snap penalties from the Beavers in this one, considering the Autzen Stadium crowd and their inexperience up front, but that really didn't happen for them. So remember last week, 0 penalties. Throughout the season, 0 sacks, so you didn't exactly go in the right direction as far as the offensive line goes over there. So my last point that I want to get to is when I look at this game specifically, because I said it in my preview, okay, you want to use this game as a springboard into the big game against the Penn State Nittany Lions. But I will say this game doesn't make me feel better than where I started going into Penn State. But on the flip side, it also certainly doesn't make me feel worse, considering how the last 3 quarters of this game went, considering how this team just got better and better and better as this game went on. I'm kind of in like a neutral area right now. And considering a 41-7 victory where Dante's putting up his season high type of numbers and all these things, I'm like, yeah, we've gotten a little bit spoiled, haven't we? Yeah, maybe just a little bit. Maybe just a little bit. I think like the early performances against Montana State and Oklahoma State set a really high bar, I think, for this team. And maybe that's what people are comparing it to. But we've got the ultimate bar coming up next week in Penn State. Right now, as we go into that game against the Nittany Lions, my biggest concern, of course, is the run defense, is the defensive line. Like I said before, you need to start at an 8 or a 9. You can't start at a 5 or a 6. How is this defensive line going to come out against the Nittany Lions? Okay, the performance early in this game, I'm like, it wasn't great. Need to come out and need to be better. That's my biggest concern because Penn State really loves to run the football. Also, you need to get Noah Whittington back. I saw Jaden Lamar in this game, and look, he had a decent game running the ball, but for the second straight week, and then Kenyon Barner, when he was up in the booth, he noticed it right away. Some of these reads and some of the not seeing where the open area is in a run game and the vision for Jaden Lamar has cost him some bigger runs. I've made my opinion known about Jaden Lamar at this point. He's fine, but I mean, the way Noah Whittington runs, the way he reads his offensive line, the way he pops through the hole, the combination of speed and power, we've seen now 2 games. We've seen now 2 weeks without Noah Whittington. And they ran for a lot of yards in this game. You got a lot of guys involved. But I think when you get to the bigger games this season, you're going to have Penn State, you're going to have Indiana. We all know the schedule at this point. I think to get the most out of this team in the run game, when the rotation gets tightened down a lot more, you're going to need Noah Whittington to be that guy. I think that is clear for the second straight week. I think you saw that. Yeah, I thought Jordan Davison ran the ball strong and well throughout the matchup. You guys know how I love about how I feel about De'Aaron Hill as well. But overall, 41-7. You got in, you got out, you made your Walmart run, and you're feeling good after a win against the Beavers of Oregon State. Let's transition to my top performers of the game, and we got to give a shout right away to Bryce Betcher. This is arguably, I know last year's game against Washington was really good for Bryce, but this is arguably maybe his best game that he's played in an Oregon uniform. He was all over the field early and often. How about 10 tackles, 2 solo tackles? Dan Lanning said it in the post-game press conference after the game. This game meant a lot to Bryce Betcher. You heard it throughout the week. Things like, hey, he is taking a folding chair, sitting out there in Autzen Stadium and just taking all of this in, this last Civil War rivalry game for him. I mean, a local Oregon kid. We know how much that this game means to people in the state, and I think he's a perfect example of that. I saw him on the Big Ten Network interview afterwards. He said almost like a carbon copy. This is for you maybe fans that have a little bit more knowledge of the Big Ten, of what Mike Hart, former Michigan running back, said about Michigan State, and saying, hey, we got to keep little bro in their place. We can't let them get their head too big. So you love that type of enthusiasm, certainly from Bryce Betcher right there. So he played a great game. I think definitely his best game of the season, no doubt. We talked about Dante Moore already. 21 of 31, 305, 4 touchdowns. Just continues to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I mean, what else can you say, really, at this point? DeCorian Moore coming off of an injury. Look, he went from carted off the field earlier in the week to looking pretty good on the first drive, catching a nice touchdown in the span of, 5 days? 6 days? What a wild week it has been. Imagine this week in the shoes of DeCorian Moore. He's going to be just fine going forward. And then we got to give another shout out to Aaron Flowers. Second straight week where he's just around the ball. He's continuously making really good plays. He had 5 tackles in this game, and I really like what he's doing right now, certainly solidifying his spot next to Dylan Thieneman at safety over there. We're going to finish this thing off just taking one final look at what the box score tells us, breaking down the box score to finish this thing off. Oregon State quarterback Malik Murphy was 5 for 18, 68 yards. That's the guy that they spent over $1 million on. Was it money well spent? I don't think so. You know, when the pocket started to shrink a little bit, and they said this on the broadcast, and I said it in the preview, okay, you shorten that clock, you shrink the pocket, he's not gonna be as accurate, and I certainly think you saw that. And I think a lot of credit goes to some of the coverage guys on the outside. If he should have had an interception in this game, I thought Brandon Finney had some good coverages down the field as well. Kind of like the rest of the team. We're going to find out exactly what this group is made out of next week. But I think all of that went into it. And I talked about, when you talk about Malik Murphy and when you talk about what he did in this game, you got to talk about like Oregon's defensive line. I thought that they would have a better performance against this Oregon State offensive line. 0 sacks and just 2 tackles for loss. That's something that really stands out to me. This was a suspect group up front. This is maybe the best game that Oregon State's offensive line maybe has played all year. Maybe. So I was expecting a little bit more out of that defensive front, not only against the run, but also against the pass, because I touched on the run before, and now I'm kind of touching on the pass. Mekhi Hughes showed his first burst of the year. 19-yard run. Is Mekhi going to get better the more touches he get? That's the way it kind of seemed like. I think he had, what did he have? 6 carries for 33 yards. And once he got to carry 3, carry 4, it's like, okay, maybe he's building some momentum a little bit. I'm really curious to see how much of Mekhi, or what that running back rotation specifically is going to look like in Central Pennsylvania next week. Oregon outgained Oregon State 585 yards to 147. Neither team was really ultra great on third down. The Ducks 4 of 10. The Beavers 4 of 12. Now, despite that longer Oregon State drive, their only touchdown drive in the first quarter, Oregon dominated the time of possession. 36 minutes and 55 seconds to 23 minutes and 5 seconds. I know there's a lot of things that happened in the first quarter of this game that might get exemplified throughout the week, but overall, this was a dominant performance. They did what they were supposed to do, and now we're in a position to really find out exactly what we're going to see from this team going forward. I've been looking forward to this week on TSOW for a very long time. This is going to be a big one. I'm looking forward to diving into maybe some of this Penn State film. Okay, been hearing maybe they haven't exactly played the best out of some of these lower level performing teams as well. So it's going to be a big time week. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on in the Oregon and Penn State communities. So I can't wait to kind of bring my thoughts to you on both Monday and Thursday. But until then, this has been that post-game show out west. I'm Ted LaRue. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.